Hello, and welcome to another episode of Remotely Serious, the podcast where we delve into the world of remote work, exploring its challenges, its triumphs, and the future it holds for all of us. I'm your host, Curtis Duggan, and today we have a truly special guest, as we always do, but this one's really special, extra special this week. He's a man who has taken the concept of working from anywhere to an entirely new level. He's a digital nomad who has traversed over 100 countries, probably living and working in a way that most of us can only dream of. Today, we're talking to the one and only Dean Kuchel. But don't expect this to be a run of the mill episode. Not that we ever make ordinary episodes, but this one's extraordinary. In this one, it gets really interesting because we talk about the digital nomad lifestyle, but we get to a point where I think we're going actually doing the opposite of glorifying it or painting an unrealistically rosy picture of remote work. We go off the beaten path of what remote work discussions are like, I think, a little bit. And we delve into the less discussed aspects of remote work and why it might not always be the panacea for companies that it's often portrayed as by remote work advocates and remote work zealots. So, whether you're a seasoned remote worker, a company contemplating the transition to remote work, or just someone intrigued by adopting this lifestyle, you can strap in. This conversation is going to be anything but typical. Prepare for an enlightening journey into the less traveled territories of remote work with me and with Dean Kuchel. And just one last note. This episode, I was in a different room using a different microphone than I generally do on our other episodes. So there's a slight echo to my voice. It's noted. And so you're just going to have to get used to it. It's going to sound slightly different, and that's okay. But please stick with us because it's a great episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Remotely Serious. I'm here with Dean Kuchel, founder of Digital Nomads Israel and United Nomads, two organizations I learned about when I met Dean for the first time in person at Running Remote in Lisbon. And Dean is the king of nomads. And you know what, Dean? It seems like a lot of nomads will say, I spend 4 months here. I'm in Lisbon 4 months, or Madeira 4 months, and Bali 4 months. But following your work and listening to a bit of your conversations on other podcasts like About Abroad, it seems like you're really going for it on the nomad thing. You do travel to many countries. You are not a slow mad, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you really have extensively gone to a lot of countries and may even be heading for the crown by going to every country in the world. I've jumped right into this. Is that fair to say that you're not a slow mad?
Yes, I'm not a slow man, and I'm not sure why. I just enjoy the whole bits of travel. It's not just about being in a new place or going visit a friend, but I enjoy the actual travel. The long bus ride, being in the airport, the security line. Not so much, but being in the airport, maybe having access to the lounge, meeting people everywhere I go. There's something exciting about it, even 10 years into my journey. But big part of why I travel so fast and just to understand how fast, like in the last 60 days, I think I've been to like 8 or 9 countries. And since you and I met in Running Remote back in May, I think, yeah, I've been to a bunch of them and different continents as well. It's to visit friends. It's not just travel. It's not just to hike mountains and see museums and explore places, but it's a lot around meeting my people, my community, friends, family, of course. And there are a lot of events to attend nowadays for digital nomads, which I gain a lot of knowledge and even more inspiration from going to this event. So it's part of what's moving me. And of course, there is this mission of visiting all 196 countries of the world eventually, but that's not the force behind the travels anymore. And I know there is a lot of criticism. If you go to a place for 4 days, you don't see much. And if you go for too long, you miss on others. I just believe that each person should really go for what feels right to them. And I travel often on a one-way ticket. So if it's good, I stick, I stay longer. And if it rains, I take the train to a different place.
Yeah, I think that's more common for nomads than maybe for people that are planning tourism and the traditional trip where you book the one-way ticket. And it's quite normal because you don't know when and where your next ticket's going to come from. And there may be some minor savings from getting a return ticket, but it doesn't matter if you want to have the optionality, as they say. I want to get into what it was like to nomad 10 years ago, but before, because you've been doing it 10 years, that is longer than a lot of people. But first, I just want to touch on events. So we met at Running Remote, which is a an enterprise focused remote work event that's held every year. I think from now on or for the foreseeable future. It was in Lisbon this year, and it looks like it will be next year. And maybe they've found a venue to hold it. But it used to be this circulating through various cities, including Montreal in my home country of Canada, the year before in 2022. You mentioned that you've gone to other nomad events. I must confess, I'm not as quick and sort of fast ranging as a nomad as you in terms of hitting all these different countries. And also, I must admit, I haven't been to that many nomad events. I have gone to Running Remote several years in a row, but there are certain nomad festivals and planned events specifically targeted at the digital nomad audience, and I just haven't been to them yet, like Bansko Nomad Fest in Bulgaria and others. What has that been like? How long you've been doing it? 10 years. Has there always been digital nomad events, or is that sort of a post-pandemic thing? And which ones stand out for you? How do you choose which ones to go to?
Well, Nomad events, as far as I know, goes back to like 2016 or 17. And I think Johnny FD was one of the first to put together conferences. I was in Chiang Mai, targeting mostly people in the marketing business. I never went to this one, but it's really one that kicked off many of the other events to follow. So there were not a lot of events back then. And when I started my journey, I didn't even know I'm a digital nomad. That I didn't know to put a name to it. I was just traveling, working remotely. It was not even a choice at the beginning, but kind of circumstances because of a visa that was delayed for me to stay in the USA. So I had to go work remote until the process ends.
So
And in the
you were
meanwhile,
trying to work in the USA, and then a visa situation kept you out of the USA, and then you
yeah,
were like,
exactly.
"Hey, the world is my oyster."
Yeah, I got a job with a company in San Francisco, a startup company, and I was hoping to stay in the Bay Area, but then the visa was delayed, so I was forced to leave the country for a few months. And by the time the visa was approved, I managed to be in like 8, 10 countries, see the worlds, and it worked. And also, the company I was working for at the time, when they asked me come back to the office, I told them, look, I don't think I'm going back to the office. Fell in love with this lifestyle, and they just said, okay, I mean, you prove that working remote has nothing to do with the performance of your work. It doesn't affect it. You're available, you perform well, your KPIs, you meet them. And I've been working remotely and traveling since then. That's 2014. So there were not a lot of, just going back to your question, not many events, but I first was attracted to meet people that lives the same lifestyle, to hear about what else I can do and take advantage of this lifestyle, but also hear more about the challenges. And at the beginning of my journey, it was a lot about the travel, like me traveling places, taking amazing selfies and photos and landscapes. And if you scroll back on my Instagram, you'll see photos from amazing places around the world. But over time, as a solo traveler, I wanted to meet people. Now it's easy to meet people when you travel, and I met a bunch of backpackers and locals anywhere I went. But there came this point that, okay, it's not only about telling my story and getting people excited about what I do. I want to share this this story and this travel and this lifestyle with people that understand my choices and live by the same values and ideas. And that's where I started, okay, I need a community. So not only I connected with other communities, if it's the Bansko community, if it's the Canary Island community, I also started one of my own. I felt like, hey, I'm from Israel, those are my people. I want to connect with people that not only live by the same values, but also grew up in the same environment. So this is where I started Digital Nomad Israel about six years ago, and from 7 people that I invited to the group, it's now turned to be a 42,000 people community. So that's crazy to see what it has become. But the nomad scene has evolved so much. And if you look back at Nomad Bansko, I think it was the first festival in Bansko was 80 people. And just a couple of days ago, they wrapped up their fourth edition, I think, and the largest one with over 700 people. And it's just
Wow.
beautiful to see people connect and just celebrate life and celebrate the digital nomad lifestyle. And now you see we have Nomad City coming up in a couple of weeks. We have Ireland hosting a beautiful event in the end of August. There is a one in Belize. There is Costa Brava hub happening in September. It's like endless options to meet people. And actually, this is a call out to the listeners: go and explore the venues and events. And I never regretted going to any of these events. I never, even Portugal, we met running remote. This was a very last minute decision. Like I had a flight, a different destination already booked, but the night before I decided, okay, I gotta go to running remote. I changed my flights and everything, paid whatever it paid. It was probably the most expensive flight. If you look at the length of flight and duration of flight and cost that I ever paid for, but absolutely worth it. The connections that I made there, the friends I met, the memories, it's completely worth it.
And in your journey, are you completely nomadic, or do you consider anywhere a base or a home on this crazy journey to 200 countries and or however many you're going to hit as the journey goes on?
Ask me the same question 48 hours ago, and I would give you a completely different answer. But no, I had no base all those years. All I travel with is a single carry-on and a day pack, and that's my home. And I feel at home. I feel at home everywhere I go, and it's very important for me also to feel this way. Never mind if it's a hostel room, hotel, Airbnb, a friend's place. I call places home. If you ask me where you're at now, I'm home. I'm in Lithuania specifically, and the reason it changed recently is that I started to date an amazing lady. And because of that, we are spending a little bit more time in a hometown in Kaunas, Lithuania. So the listeners cannot see my setup, but I'm in a room, in an office, and it's the
Yeah.
most settled that I've been ever in my life. I just bought a monitor and a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah. It's not
So I have
settling
like a
down,
setup.
but it's changing the gear shift to
Yes,
one
yes,
different
and it's
gear.
nice to have roots. And I spend a lot of
Yeah.
time in Bali, a place which also I kind of call a base. I got stuck
Mm.
by choice during pandemic, and that was pretty good to stay to be there. And it's a place I keep going back to. But I'm looking for this place that I want to call home, but I don't think it will be a single place. I am sure I will continue to hop between two, three destinations every year, all year.
Yeah. Well, I think even more than most people, you have a perspective on all of these different destinations. There are certain people that are great nomads, they're influencers, they're thinkers, they're thought leaders. But if they spend a lot of time in Portugal, they might talk a lot about Portugal. Or if they spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia, they talk about Southeast Asia and sort of the quirks and idiosyncrasies of Bali or Canggu or Chiang Mai. But you've been a lot of places. So the reason I bring that up is because I noticed at running remote, and I'm noticing more online too, even more now, the destinations themselves, the ministries or the tourism departments or the departments of attracting economic activity are coming to running remote. They are posting, they are creating programs, they're creating marketing campaigns specifically to attract digital nomads and remote workers. And this can be anything from ads to a booth at a trade show at running remote to an entire program like in Croatia, where I know you've participated, and they bring people in to workshop. Actually, I probably don't even know how to describe it best. But my question is, having seen some of this and even being directly involved with these destinations, are there some that are doing it better than others? And if someone's listening and they are, they're sitting at their desk in Buenos Aires or or Uruguay or any country in the world or Lithuania, and someone says, hey, your job this quarter is to increase our digital nomads and remote workers coming to our city by 100%. Go do it. Are there things that person at that ministry or that city tourism board, whatever you call it, that they can do? What have you seen from this front, from the front of destinations wanting to attract people formally and officially, not just on forums and Reddit, but like as an official policy of the city?
It's a great question, and a burning one is really we see a lot of cities and countries making the call to for nomads to come and spend longer time. And in the past, it was Board of Tourism telling people come visit us. Now we see Board of Tourism saying come stay with us. They want nomads and people who stay longer terms than the usual weekend or 1 week experience. You mentioned Croatia, and I think they're doing really good job with not just a one-time single effort of some advertising and putting a booth, but there is a digital nomad association. They're working hand in hand with the government. The Board of Tourism has a task force that deals with nomads. They put content out. They have a year-long program for nomads. There are so many events throughout the year. I probably don't know half of them that specifically target remote professionals and digital nomads, and it proves to be worth the while for them. Right? You see places like Dubrovnik or other regions that see less tourism during low season, and all of a sudden you have a few hundreds of people staying in the country, keeping some businesses even alive and operating. Bensko is another good, Bensko in Bulgaria, another good example for a place that is flourished thanks to nomads during low season, although there is no much of involvement of the government. We see Buenos Aires having an entire team focusing on digital nomads. You have a welcome kit. You touch down in Buenos Aires, you have a welcome kit waiting for you in digital locker with your public transportation card, with explanation about the city, with discount for transportation,
That's
and
amazing.
SIM card.
Who's doing that? Is the city doing that? They're when you register a visa, they're getting that ready for you.
You don't even need to register for visa, I think, for most passport holders, I would say. But
Okay.
there's an organization called
Wow.
Nomads BA, Nomads Buenos Aires, and it's an official organization by the city. And they're doing so much. Just had their event a couple of weeks ago. So they're doing so much to attract it. And I think the biggest step that we see countries do is to connect with the local community, with the nomads. It's not just some policy, but it's really in having an open discussions with the locals and with digital nomads to understand what each need. Because bringing nomads into Portugal, and we've seen a little bit of a backlash there as a result, or we saw it in even in Croatia. People raise some eyebrows. Hey, you offer people visa for 1 year. They don't need to pay taxes. What about us, the local ask? So this conversation has to happen, and it also has to pay off for the locals. So some countries doing it better, and I don't want to give the countries too much, the governments too much credit. I love governments. I work a lot with governments, but I keep saying it. I don't wait for governments. It's the private sector that has to drive those changes and bring the nomads in at the end of the day. So we see Nomad X in Portugal being the liaison between the nomads and the locals and driving people into the country. It's not Portugal bringing the people, but it's the multiple events you have on the islands and in the cities, etc. Countries should put the call out for digital nomads, not only in a way to attract them as tourists. Yes, we
Yeah.
come to spend money, but the opportunity is much bigger than just being a tourist. It's the opportunity to be involved in the local community, to do skill share, to help others, to whatever help they might need, if at all. They might not need help. They just come here, be a good tourist. That's good enough. You don't need to save the world every time you travel to any destination. But at the end of the day, we see remote professionals going with amazing talent, with good income, typically compared to the places we travel. And I think there is a bigger opportunity than just spend money as a tourist. But it's how can you make this place better? And also, it's how you pay it forward. Even if you just post about destination, market the
Yeah.
place, put a good word, leave a review, leave a tip. Everything like that
Yeah.
supports such effort.
The year is unfolding, and so this we're recording this in the summer of 2023, and it does seem like there are more layoffs. Many jobs that would have been remote have at least in North America, and in Western Europe, there has been a slowdown. There may be a recession, depending on how you define it. And there's also complaints I'm seeing on Twitter about kind of a squeeze from both sides. Maybe there's less high-paying jobs flowing freely, and also people are saying, Airbnb isn't what it used to be. The costs of just posting up somewhere, and for many people, it was some kind of geo arbitrage around, hey, in London or in New York or Tel Aviv, it's a little bit more expensive. And if I go somewhere else in Southeast Asia or in an island somewhere, it'll be cheaper, for better or for worse. And there's the whole gentrification conversation. But I guess what I'm wondering is, in your communities, are you seeing people feel a pinch? Do you think that there's there's a wind blowing back against the movement a little bit. That's just simply economic, that there's not quite as much froth and just total excitement, crypto money flowing, tech jobs flowing as maybe 18 months ago or 2 years ago. Because I know, I believe in general, from a secular point of view, like over time, the long term, this is only going to grow. That more and more remote work, more and more digital nomads. But I'm just wondering if right now in this summer, I do feel a little bit of a cool wind that's sort of blowing back against the trend. And I don't know if it's my imagination because I'm not traveling as much as you, and I don't see it like really on the boots on the ground nearly as much as you do because you get around to a lot of different communities.
I think you have a good gauge on the trend right now, and we see I see the same. Maybe Google is surfacing different blog posts to you than me, but I see a lot of posts about remote work is dead and hybrid model is not working. And to be honest, and maybe to many surprise, I agree with it a little bit. The promise of remote work before the pandemic was that employees who work remote are more dedicated, more loyal, they are more productive. But what we actually see, and now we have the numbers and we have the data coming from the large and the big companies, the corporates, it's not. People work a little bit less, they might have a little bit more free time. It's definitely good for the employees. I think most people who choose to work from home are happy with this setup. But when we talk about innovation, productivity, performance, um, it feels like it's not there. It's not at the same level as in working from office. And it might be also something that we need to accept, that life is not all about business and making another dollar and making the 110% at anything. It's okay if Salesforce or Google will maybe earn 5% less, but their employees will have a little bit more time for recreation and family. Okay, that's another argument. Uh, but I cannot take only one side here. I obviously push for remote work, and like you, I believe this is gonna grow. It's gonna grow with the gig economy, people starting their own businesses and freelance, and young entrepreneurs, our generation and Gen Z. They will start their businesses and they will allow people to work remote because they want to be also location independent. Right? It's less important for the 40, 50, 60 years old leaders of today's businesses. But again, I go to the point, if you look at data from Salesforce, Google, Amazon, Apple, remote work for many of them didn't prove to be as promising. And especially
Yeah.
now that we see the markets, there's some face wind, business is a little bit slower, and inflation is at peak. The first people to go home will always be the remote professionals. Even if I had a business with a large team, in a time of crisis, I want everybody in the office.
Well, this sounds like this has got to be. This is monumental, just for me, in terms of because I think you're being the most honest and transparent. Again, it's a subjective opinion, but I really appreciate what you're saying because I think there are a lot of remote work influencers and zealots who everyone knows that it's better for the individual. But what many won't admit or are insist on saying is that it's always better for companies to go remote because they will hire better talent and that remote workers are always more productive. And in some ways, it's like being gaslighted. And there is like this counter movement of large companies saying, no, we've checked and remote work is not working, is not more productive for us. It may have some other benefits. We may have hired some people that we couldn't have, but it's not necessarily more productive. And then what the remote work zealots will say is, well, you just haven't implemented async properly, or you haven't implemented the right processes. If you knew how to leverage XYZ software and async and these various things, it's your fault. But I think there is this fundamental choice where some companies may simply be in office and it's better for them forever. And some companies may be hybrid and some companies will be remote, definitely. Like there will be Gen Z, lots of companies that are remote. And there's not one right answer. And it is primarily driven by the fact that this is better for the individual and individuals have leverage. So individuals have power and leverage. But I find it really, really interesting. I mean, I'd love to get on a panel discussion because the remote work conferences are all pro remote work. You're going to the religion conference and saying, is this a good religion? And they're like, yes, it's a good religion. And it's not a multi-religion conference. It's not, I don't hear, and nothing against, like, let's say, running remote, but they don't have someone providing an opposing point of view on the panel. They rarely, if ever, I've never seen someone say, well, here's the counterpoint, like a news program, to kind of talk about what actually happened, with a certain company that went remote and maybe had some negative effects and decided to go back to the office. I'd love to hear about that. So I'm on a bit of a rant, but it's because I'm excited about what you said, because I think so. I follow a really popular remote work advocate, Steph Smith, who's now with A16Z. Great career, brilliant individual. She worked for The Hustle. She now works for A16Z. But it's always about how, like, remote work is always good. If companies aren't better if by choosing remote work, they're just doing it wrong. It must be them. It must be the company's fault, because it's never the fact that maybe just being in the office is more productive for a bunch of super talented individuals that want to get charged up around each other. So I'm going to come down off of my platform and my rant, but I just want to say a heartfelt thank you that you said, sometimes it isn't more productive, and that's just how it is. So thanks, Dean.
I love this and the passion and the energy because I feel the same. And put all partners around the table for the discussion. Everybody is wrong and everybody is right. Obviously, there are companies that implementing remote work not in the most efficient and effective way. And obviously, there are companies that did it and it still didn't work for them. Remote work is not the answer or the solution to everything and anything. And it's not, it shouldn't be. Remote work is not for everyone. And also on the other side, remote work and digital nomad is a lifestyle, is not a profession. And many people I know are just not good being responsible for their own tasks and doing a performance. And they need someone to oversee them and manage them. And I always been saying it. Working remote is soft skills, is having the discipline, being on a Friday night in Thailand when you need to service customers in East Coast USA and say, okay, how do you give up the full moon party to stay at home and work when all your friends are out? Do you have the discipline to do it? And people, unfortunately, many don't. So this is where companies feels remote work fell for them, and it's you cannot blame the companies. What you gonna say? Like, yeah, train your clients not to work on a Friday. Let's move to 4 days a week, etc.
I think the people that think remote work should work for everyone are often people who have a bias and forget that not everyone is like them. So the kind of person who has been successful at remote work and has a survivorship bias. I tried remote work. I built a great career in remote work, and therefore I look back on remote work and see all the things I did right. Maybe I learned some lessons, but wow, this is great. But people have these blind spots where, especially if you're an excellent, diligent, highly internally motivated, autodidact, self-teaching, self-correcting individual who's always carefully reflecting on what to do better, then you may have all of those traits that make you a good remote worker. The vast majority of people, more than half, certainly maybe even 70, 80, maybe even 90%, aren't like this. They're not lazy, absolutely not. Most people aren't lazy. Of the 8 billion people on earth, almost all of them are hardworking.
It's not about being lazy.
No.
It's about outperforming, and most people don't look to outperform. They want to do
Right.
the 9 to 5, get their salary, great career, and go on about their day and night. So I think it's not a problem. It's just this is how we are, and not every person is a solopreneur that's going to start his own startup company. And this is why remote work doesn't work for so many. And I know people who don't want to work remote. Give them the privilege of working from anywhere they want. It's like, no thanks, I want to go to the office. Many nomads, yes, they are in Chiang Mai, but they wake up and go to a co-working space. What's a co-work? It's an office, right? So
Yeah.
many of us need to have this environment, to people around us, the communication, the community. So there's no one answer. Obviously, it works for some, it doesn't work for some. And we talked about, yes, you can hire better, more accurate, specifically professionals from different countries, even have some saving on this. And it happened in the past. Companies in the US hire people in Israel, in Poland, amazing talent in Ukraine, in India. They work from offices, right? We already hire offshore for many, many years. That's nothing new. But those companies put together offices for their teams in these countries, and it worked very well for them. Now we say, hey, we don't want the office anymore. We don't need it, and it's okay. Nothing gonna happen. And of course, there are a lot of companies that help you to do the transition from office to remote. But if you have hybrid teams and some in the office and some not, and some people want to be remote but they cannot because of the nature of the job, and some people don't want to commute, you have this mix of emotions and motions in the company, and that can create a lot of tension. And also, I'm the founder of this company, and we are building, I don't know, a software, some app. I want to focus on this app. I don't want to focus about he works remote, she doesn't, he cannot travel, he couldn't pick up the phone, internet connectivity issues. Of course, this is why we have operations and human resource and people to take care of it. But all of a sudden, companies are required to deal with something that they never did before, and they don't feel it's irrelevant to their line of business. It's a change of way of thinking for so many years. So how do you implement this?
Yeah, I think the counterweight that so we've gotten into some of the fact that companies don't care about remote as much as what you're saying, which is just doing their line of business, generating revenue, getting their product to market, building their product, building features. That is what most CEOs care about. I think the unlock for a lot of CEOs that takes us all the way back around to why remote work is great for companies is just that unlock of talent. If someone is in a certain city and they can only hire, this is the thing you hear from all the people promoting remote work for enterprises, which is if you're just hiring within 50 miles, well, it's great if you're in San Francisco, but if you're in a lot of other places, you may not find the systems engineer, you may not find the enterprise salesperson, you may not find the exact person you need if you only hire within 50 to 100 miles of your building. And if you hire remote workers you can hire around the world, you get the exact person for the job.
Until COVID-19, not a single company ever said, hey, let's go remote. Let's shut down the offices, let everyone work remote. I worked with 5 or 6 different startups between 2014 and until COVID. None of them was a remote friendly, remote first, or remote at all. I was the only employee among 100 or 500 or 10 employees that worked remote. So it was not a thing until 2 3 years ago, right? Only new companies who formed typically by young people went with a remote first approach, Automatic, Hotjar, GitLab, etc. But you didn't see any of the big companies going remote all of a sudden. So it's a big change, and I'm obviously on the side that wants to see remote work being a right, and work being acceptable and not just a privilege. But it takes time, and we need to also listen to the people who run their businesses and not just the employees, to understand their pains and where it doesn't work.
I think what's interesting is you're right. The proportion of companies that are remote is still low, and I think what happens is I tend to hear about the same companies over and over again. So people will say remote is working for enterprise companies like GitLab and Doist, and that's great. It's great to hear about GitLab and Doist, and several names come up again and again. But I think that over time that has a reinforcing effect that like I kind of keep hearing about the same 5 or 6 companies. There's millions of companies. If this was growing, I would expect to start hearing about more and more. And you do hear about more. You hear about Shopify. You hear about certain companies that have gone remote. But I think if you're trying to market this movement, if you're pro remote work for the enterprise, it would almost be like you want to hear about a new name every month instead of like, okay, it's been 2 or 3 years and I say, hey, what are some great companies that are remote? Oh, GitLab and Doist, and it's like, okay, yeah, but I heard that 2 years ago. So that's I love GitLab, love Doist. Is that's not the point that they don't need to do anything different. They're doing it. They're doing great. But what I'd love to hear from the entire movement is like a bit more perspective on, yeah, okay, you've got your buzzwords on who's doing it and who's doing it well, but I want to see those buzzwords evolve because they get stale over time if they're used again and again. But yeah, no, I'm glad we we dug deeper in this conversation. It's one of those things where I really appreciate this. I'm gonna pause and get a bit meta. I really appreciate that we're having this conversation that we're having right now, Dean, because I've listened to probably, I don't know, two or 300 episodes over the last 4 or 5 years of remote work podcasts of various flavors and genres. And I think that, whenever you listen to a bunch of things like that in a row of the same type, there's certain themes that pop up, and you can start to hear some things over and over again. And one of the, and, over and over again, it's that somewhat self-congratulatory thing of, this is perfect, this is great for everyone. If we're in this community of digital nomads, aren't we just smarter and more evolved and doing things right, where all the people at the office are wrong? So I feel like what we've been talking about so far, you've brought a very unique perspective that is explaining and promoting your lifestyle without being unnecessarily rosy about what it entails, and saying it's not right for everyone. So I think this is gonna be a great episode. But so thank you again.
Thank you, thank you. I'm extremely excited about this lifestyle, right? But we also need to be fair. There was a hype for 2 3 years due to COVID, and it's dying down a little bit, and it's okay. It's a process. We had this hockey stick growth going from zero people working remote to everybody working remote, and now the trend is on a downshift for a little bit. But I believe, as you start this conversation, it will grow. More and more people around the world will work remote. But now we need to slow down and make sure we do it right, and we don't just send people to work from anywhere they want, to find out that the economy is not doing good, the companies are shutting down. Because if Salesforce employees who work remote are not performing well, eventually they will not have a job because Salesforce will have to shut down its doors, right? So
Yeah.
that's the risk. And a lot of people, really, they, especially young people who go on their first nomadic experience, they feel they're on vacation. They forget their obligations they have to companies and the business they have and their clients. And it happens no matter if you're employed or if you're a business owner. And this is a challenge that I've been facing for 10 years. And I feel I'm disciplined enough, but I'm sure that many times, I opted for the boat ride or the skydiving experience rather than stay in front of my computer.
Do you think that that will change eventually, in the sense of that large employers, the big ones that are kind of bringing people back to the office, do you think they will ever trust that, not just, I can see with a team of 20 or 50 or 100, the kinds of size companies I like to start, I like to be part of. Startups is what I like to be part of, and it's what I know. But I had a company that got acquired, and I was briefly part of a large company for 6 months during the pandemic. Do you think these large companies with 5,000, 20,000 employees will ever trust that all 20,000 employees aren't taking the boat ride, watching Netflix, going to the full moon festival party down at the beach? Do you think that a gigantic company will ever have that kind of trust? Because I feel like this might be something where there's a psychology in human nature. You know how you have these laws about the psychology of tribes. Evolutionarily, we can trust the 20 people around us at most, and then there's 120 people we can consider friends, but our brain starts to break before we can consider 1,000 people high trust, or 10,000 people high trust. And we have these nation states with flags that try and say, hey, okay, we all have the same flag, so 30 million people can trust each other with the flag. But there's just something in the psychology where I wonder, maybe remote work is embedded in our psychology of tribes and close-knit communities from 10,000 years ago, where it works up to 150 people, maybe the most, but it'll just never work at large numbers, because our brains can't process that. We can't trust 10,000 people we don't know. I know it's a little
What
bit
is a
crazy, but
what is a company, right? A company is
yeah.
just a group of people, and I don't think we need to ask the companies to trust us, the employee. I think it's our job to show them that we are trustworthy. And I really, this is a responsibility that I roll over to the employees and not to the companies. I don't expect any Fortune 500 company to have this trust, but I think this trust needs to be built with the employees. And the big numbers might play a factor here, because when you and I sit in the office next to each other, and we know who covers and who's doing what. But when you are 3,000 miles away from me, I can say, you know what? I'm not going to close this ticket because I trust Curtis to do it. But there's no communication between us because we're in a different time zone and your Slack is off and I went to bed. And this asynchronous communication not always works. But if we sat in the same office, desk to desk, and say, hey, Curtis, are you Are you taking care of ticket 1, 2, 3? Yes, no. The responsibility is moving from hand to hand, and all the ends are being tied together. This doesn't happen all the time with remote work, no matter what technology you use, because it's not only the technology, it's how people use it, if they use it. Do you have Asana? Do you have Google Keep or Todoist or anything else? Are you actually using it? Are you really typing everything you need into Notion? So if Google can trust 20,000 people, yes, Google can. Can 20,000 people perform every day from the beaches of Copanyan as they performed in the headquarters in San Francisco in the Bay Area? I don't know. I don't think so, actually.
Dean, do you work async, or do you when you have a project or a team or colleagues, do you try and match hours or have overlap, or are you pro async? In your let's set aside the big companies for a second and just talk about you. Like, how do you like to do that? Do you
I'm pro
believe in async?
async. Yes, and I would say it. So nowadays, solopreneur. I lead United Nomads and Digital Nomad Israel. It's my own business and I run it. And of course, there is async work with my team. But when I worked also before that for some corporate as a customer success manager, I was doing it for over 10 years, partially from the office and for many years remotely. And it was async, but it also was a lot of staying up until 2, 3 a.m. I never allowed myself to decline a client request to a meeting, even if it's 2 a.m. on my time of the on my side of the world, because I'm getting paid to answer and get on the phone with this client, and I cannot tell my client, "Hey, listen, I'm surfing in Australia in Bondi Beach right now. Can we do it another day? No, work come first." And I always reminded myself, because especially back then, 5, 6, 7 years ago, where there were not a lot of jobs, definitely not a lot of remote jobs. What allows me to be in Bondi Beach or to travel to Tonga and Samoa and Bali is the fact that I have a remote job. And if I fail at my job, I lose this level of freedom that I have. And that might be what we lost over the past 2 years. There were so many jobs. You can leave a job, and 2 days after, you will have a new job with a better salary, benefits, and of course, you can work remote, right? Because you can make whatever demand you wanted. These days are over. Now there are way more applications for every job, especially for remote jobs. So we can no longer come in these demands, and now people will start to feel the pressure and maybe start to perform better. So I think yes, I'm big on it, but again, it's the same. Are you disciplined enough to write your notes and leave all the communication that you need before you close your laptop at night? Again, I meet a lot of people that don't do it.
Yeah, well, you mentioned something about jumping on a call with a client at a certain time of the day, no matter what, because it's sort of your prerogative to meet them where they are, and regardless of, oh, I decided to move to a different time zone, but it's my job to meet them where they are at the certain time. I think what that says to me is, or what that reveals to me, is a certain kind of, I don't filtering, where I think a lot of companies that are product led growth or marketing led growth, where they don't need a lot of synchronous sales. Maybe they're just a self serve software company that kind of has a plan that you free trial you sign up for, and they have a product led growth cycle. They can afford to be completely 100% async, but I've yet to see an example of how 100% async works for a sales led organization. And sales led organizations are not going to go away with their sales led growth at an organization. So how do you close a major client if you're saying, hey, we don't actually have meetings with you, we're going to share a doc and like give our commentary on our own time whenever we feel like it, and then yada yada yada, etc. Eventually we'll close a deal together. So I think there's just certain things that are human. They're 5,000, 10,000 years old, about breaking bread and looking across the table in sales, and in any kind of partnership that's like sales, where I just don't understand how async can support that. It seems certain small deals can close over emails back and forth, never having a meeting. But there are certain at a certain scale. I think a lot of the thought leaders that promote async just haven't closed deals that big. Like there's a lot of people that are like, my 100-person company that does a product led growth SaaS does async and it works. And it's like, great. What about this 3,000-person company that does hardcore sales? Like, what are you're going to tell them what to do? Anyway, I feel like I get you of all the guests so far, Dean, you've brought out the most
passionate emotion in me. I think I've had some great conversations. I
Yeah.
brought my full self to every conversation, but in a good way, in a very good way. You brought out the most passionate. Anything like as we get close to wrapping up here, is there anything you're excited about that's new in 2023 or 2024? Something you're going to do for the first time, something fun, something you're looking forward to in your lifestyle?
Well, 2023 is a year that brought a new relationship to my life. So that's
Yeah.
really exciting for me, because we travel together, and that's a new way for me to experience this lifestyle. So I'm very excited for this, and then I'm excited for all the events. If before, 2022, 2021, or before, you had to like look for that one event for Nomad on the calendar, and if you miss it, that's it. You're done with events for the year. Now there is such an amazing influx of events, and that's beautiful because it helps the community to grow. And I think it helps the community to grow in a really good and new directions. In May, I had to choose. Over the same week, there were 5 different events for digital nomads.
I think I know the week. Yeah, it was like they
Yeah,
all decided to be on the same day. 5 different events
and
around the world.
I operate on FOMO. You started the first question is why I travel so fast. Let's admit it. Part of it, it's FOMO. I want to be in all events. I want to meet people. I want to be in birthdays and hang out with people. So part of it is I want to be there. And now I'm excited again. We just had Buenos Aires last week. We have again Nomad City in Canary Islands in a couple of weeks. Ireland, Spain, Croatia, Belize. Everybody's doing something. We have some events in different countries in Africa this year. So this is why I'm most excited because as we grow, we also mature, and it's not only about me being an influencer, but it's more about the community. And we have more and more people creating the conversation with local communities as we see that there is an impact. It might not be as big as we wish or think we make, but we need to have this conversation and we need to travel in a fair way and take advantage in not take advantage, but we are privileged. Most nomads are privileged in a way that I think we don't even understand. And it takes, for me, it took some travels to some really poor countries, and even not to poor countries, some second tier countries in Eastern Europe, in South America, to learn how privileged and lucky I am. And I'll tell you what I'm the most excited about this year. I spoke about the events. I went to 4 events already this year, and for the first time in 10 years of me being a digital nomad, I had a retreat in India where 50% of the participants were local Indians.
Wow, that's great.
I I went to running remote in Portugal. I met people from South Africa and from Nigeria, and I know that I will go to Spain soon, and I'll meet more people from Morocco and Algeria and Kenya that take on the remote work. And if for me and you, remote work is like, yeah, cool, I'm traveling the world, it's really fun and nice. For them, it truly changed the trajectory of their life, their family's life, their tribe's life. And I think this is for me the biggest promise of remote work. It's not about it is about us traveling the world and having fun, but it's a lot about how this lifestyle and remote work changes the future for many others. And I think this is the conversation we also should have with the companies. Don't hire people from Africa because you get a cheaper talent or you want to support remote work, but do it because you really make a change in the world. And this is what I see already happening in 2023. There are a number of organizations pushing for it, and this is beautiful. So I changed the order of things, and this is the most exciting for me.
Yeah, shout out to the South African team that came to running remote. I had a really deep dive conversation with them about establishing Africa as a remote work destination, the things that they're interested in, and it was slightly different than what I heard from European and other places. So shout out to the South African team, and that makes total sense. Just in terms of what resonated with me a lot was just the integration with locals and your 50-50 comment about the retreat where the locals are participating, because I think the vast majority of people want an interchange of cultures, and not this not to be an expat playground community, that these digital nomad communities are expat enclaves, separated from the locals. The whole point is to bring some of yourself and bring some of your culture, share it with others, and share it with the locals in a way, that we'll see. If we go on another podcast, maybe soon, I feel like we still have hours and hours of stuff we could cover. Everything from this gentrification question to maybe what it's like to travel with a partner after you've been traveling solo for a long time, just to all these destinations you've been to. We've only really scratched the surface, and we had a brief time socializing in Lisbon, but it's been great getting to know you one-on-one even more on the podcast. I hope someday soon we can do episode 2 of this season of Curtis and Dean chatting, because I just feel like I've only scratched the surface. I've only gotten 0.1% of what we can talk about. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I would love to go on that 2 hours of friends here, turn it into like kind of a Joe Rogan episode.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me here.
Thanks so much, Dean.